Hello and welcome to Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we are back to have another conversation about the future of our planet and our sustainable economy. We're sitting down again with Newday Impact Investing CEO Doug Heske to talk about environmental, social, and governance investing. This series is designed to help all of us understand how investors can support companies that make meaningful difference for the environment and people. And today we're going to start a two-part conversation that builds on our last discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We turn now to look at what we can do to help the next generation meet the unique challenges of the climate crisis and global competition. 1.8 billion youth around the world, young men and women, are readying themselves to take their place in their economies and communities. But as we know, today's challenges are far more technologically and intellectually difficult than the ones their parents and grandparents faced. They can be ready for great achievements with the right tools and support, and there are companies working to engage with them around the world. You can learn more about Newday Impact Investing at newdayimpact.com. That's all one word, newdayimpact.com. And in particular, take some time to explore the Sustainable Development Equity Portfolio that Doug's team manages. The idea behind this portfolio is that the generation of younger people that are growing up today will be charged with the responsibility of building the new ship to take humanity toward a sustainable future, while we also slow down the sinking of the old ship. So youth, especially in Africa, need to become skilled at regenerative agriculture and the restoration of the planet while providing equitable access to food, water, and other resources. Today, we're going to walk through a list of stocks to consider if your priority is education and youth empowerment, including Zoom, which is traded on the NASDAQ under the symbol ZM, Atlassian, which is a software tools company, also traded on the NASDAQ. The symbol is TEAM, Team. Chegg, traded on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol CHGG. Stride, also on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol LRN. And 2U, that's 2U, which is traded on the NASDAQ under the symbol TWOU. And finally, two companies in the medical and pharmaceutical space, Talkspace, traded on the NASDAQ under Talk, and Atai Life Sciences, which is traded on the NASDAQ under the symbol ATA. Doug, welcome back. It is always a pleasure to have you here. How you doing today?
Mitch, likewise, I'm doing well. And this is a very important issue to me personally. I've got 3 kids at home, or not necessarily at home, but on their way to college or already in college. And, we've spent the last couple of years, of course, thinking about their personal development and professional development hereafter. It's encouraging to see this generation of youth that care so much about these global issues that we all have to solve for. And my son in particular, our oldest, who is now 19, is majoring in both physics and environmental sciences. And I like to think about the work that we do at Newday has had some level of impact on that as well.
Well, we live in an era that has demonstrated that hidden biases blind society to opportunities to deliver progress in sustainable lifestyles. So what are the critical features of corporate strategies that you look for when addressing youth and helping them learn to overcome bias and think about problems as your son might, both scientifically and from an emotional or political perspective?
Yeah, that's a very important question. So I guess, first of all, to set the stage for today's discussion and something that our listeners should be reflecting on as we proceed forward, is that 65% of today's grade school kids will end up at jobs that haven't been invented yet. That's according to the United States Department of Labor. Now, this is very exciting for the generation of youth that will fill these jobs and to the companies that will employ them. This younger generation are beginning to take their, what I would describe as their rightful place on the world stage as the impact leaders and change makers of today and for tomorrow. And they are speaking with incredibly loud voices. They are leading movements and they are voting with their consumer purchases and investment dollars today. This generation is massive, now representing 42% of the world's population that are 25 years old or younger. Here in the US, that's about 150 million people, 150 million kids or younger people that are positioned to make change, that are determined to make an impact, that are developing their own blueprints for change. And this millennial generation, as we characterize them, alone now represents 1/3 of all US adults and nearly half of the entire US workforce, and perhaps and even more importantly, 40% of all consumers. So that's translating into corporate behavior in really meaningful ways. And as you had stated, this generation globally is now 1.8 billion people. Now, that's real power behind that. So 49% of them are self-identified change makers who want to work for a sustainable company. 60% want jobs that have social impact. 9 in 10 believe that the success of a business should be measured by more than just financial performance. So really, really important data behind this. And they are loudly saying to government officials, and we've heard this many times, and corporate leaders, if you don't make the change that we want to see, then get out of the way. Mm-hmm. Yep. So given this context, let me answer your question more directly. This group of 1.8 billion youth need to become skilled for the work that will be required to support a world that's greener, more technologically advanced, and one that will require a new approach to almost everything that we do to support a healthier planet with a lot more people living on it. So I like to characterize these jobs as number one that requires building a new ship, as you had characterized, and two, that's more resilient and more sustainable, and companies that are developing jobs that are required to, as we were talking about just a moment ago, slow down the sinking of the old ship. So trying to think about the things that we need to be doing as a society to make sure that humanity is well taken care of as we're building a better path for the futures. Our educational systems are also going to need to change, allowing for more remote learning, for jobs that are a part of the green economy, and for jobs that are a part of this new digital world. So as a part of the work that we do at Newday, we are identifying companies that will be next generation employers, and companies that are successfully delivering these solutions to students that are going to allow them to build these skill sets. So it's companies that are digitally connecting schools all around the world to the internet, companies that help match jobs with prospective employees and harness data from labor. Equipping young people with the skills they need to win jobs in the rapidly growing renewable energy and green economy, creating new breakthroughs in personalized technology-supported learning to be deployed to support remedial education for young people. Companies that are expanding access to remote learning and work opportunities for young people who live in remote areas or even in refugee camps. Companies that are expanding access to cognitive behavioral therapy for young people affected by mental health challenges and disorders. That's something we're going to talk about today. And then companies that are delivering AI-based translation technology that allows more people to access resources for learning skills development and employment. And one of the areas that we probably won't talk about today, but is also very, very important, and a lot of exciting stuff going on in the private space, is these companies that are developing innovative financial mechanisms to unlock the potential and solutions for people all over the world.
You know, it's interesting thinking about where young people today are relative to where their intellectual existence will be 40 or 50 years from now. They're not going to live through one revolution or one enlightenment, but probably two or three.
Correct.
And so how do you identify the issues that matter most when you're considering what to put into a portfolio at Newday?
Yeah, I think it comes back to this set of challenges that we were just discussing. And certainly there are aspects of this work around ed tech, around traditional education, that leave members of lower income communities disadvantaged as compared to wealthier communities. So when we think about, as an example, digitally connecting schools around the world, like we have this perspective being in more developed countries that everybody has access to technology and everybody has access to the internet, when oftentimes there are communities that may have just several copies of a textbook that are shared amongst the entire community.
Yeah.
So all of this needs to evolve from here in really, really important ways. We have this explosion of youth that's going on right now, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and Africa itself. And it's something that needs to be addressed immediately.
So let's get into the remote learning and work space. Now, learning isn't going to be something that ends at the age of 18 or 22 or 24 when you finish college or high school. It's something that's going to be ongoing throughout your life, and it'll be, I think, integrated into work. So let's talk about a couple of companies. And the first is Zoom. The stock has had an amazing ride during the pandemic. They went from around $125 a share to a high of $478. And then it fell back to around 125. And it's currently trading at 33 times earnings. So does Zoom have the legs to become a comprehensive remote work and learning environment? Or is it simply a company that had its moment and somebody else is going to do the next innovation?
Yeah, so if I may, I think that it's important to talk a little bit about the remote learning and work environment right now, because It has been such an incredibly important catalyst to where we're headed in the future regarding education. And as you had pointed out, not just education for youth, but education for all. How companies are conducting themselves and getting new information into their employee basis, and how they allow for the flexibility of this new work environment. So undeniably, the COVID-19 crisis has accelerated this world of digitalization and remote learning by years.
Yep.
There was recently a McKinsey global survey of executives that was done, and companies have accelerated, according to the survey, the digitization with customers, supply chains, and their operations by 3 to 4 years. I've heard some statistics that have said that this has accelerated even more dramatically than that. And the share of digital and digitally enabled products has accelerated by, shockingly, 7 years.
Yeah.
Consumers have also moved dramatically toward online channels, and companies and educational institutions have responded to that need as well. So the lesson that I think we've all come to understand is that the COVID pandemic has taught us that we live in this world that we can no longer delay our reimagining and restructuring of the way we do work and the way that we learn today. So some organizations have found really progressive new ways to embrace flexible teams, as an example, working in ways that never would have been thought practical just even a little over a couple of years ago. So this is all going to be very, very important. So Zoom is one such organization that is delivering things in a way that allows for a broader audience of both youth and adults to access information. So, but there are still some inherent challenges. So let's be clear that Zoom does not help low-income communities who don't have internet access or home computers, which is a fundamental problem in low-income communities around the world. However, for those that do have access, it can make accessing education easier, and students that have to walk for an hour, as an example, they take to school, can go online now. So video conferencing is changing the way that people communicate. So a great example of this at Zoom is that they've been working with this organization called At Students Rising Above. Mm-hmm. Their organization needed a reliable and scalable platform for webinars and internal communication in their organization as well. So they ended up adopting the Zoom platform. And they deployed this in what is a hub of 11,000 registered users. And they partner with nonprofits who use the hub for resources and lesson plans for their students, which means that students have, of course, broader access around a very large geographic community to access those types of webinars, which is really, really important. So
So as the United States, for instance, invests in extending connectivity into rural areas, particularly low-income areas, Native American reservations and so forth as well, does a company like Zoom benefit from partnering with a nonprofit to get this technology in front of students and young people the same way that, for instance, Apple did in the 80s when it was giving Apple IIs to schools?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the great thing about Zoom is that they've sort of become this de facto platform for online delivery of education and information. I think they've got a very, very exciting future. Of course, valuations across the entire market, given what's going on geopolitically right now, has opened up opportunities to own some of these companies at better valuations than what we've seen over the last couple of years. So Zoom has been obviously a primary beneficiary of what's happened with the COVID-19 pandemic, but they are without question here to stay. And I think have extraordinary opportunities, not just to expand their business here in the US, but all around the world on a go-forward basis.
Well, so let's turn to Atlassian, which is another company that in a lot of ways is giving away a great deal of technology in order to win its future audience.
Yes.
And so they're a leader in collaboration and project management tools. And I've used various Atlassian tools like Confluence and Jira across projects with many different clients and companies. It's a remarkable set of tools and something that is considered almost a checklist item for Generation Z employees, that you need these tools to get them engaged. But this is a stock that, again, climbed dramatically during the pandemic, jumping from like $150 a share to $458 before falling back to around $300. It's never earned a profit. So what's its strength in engaging youth? Does their support of youth today potentially pay off that same way that the Apple investment did?
Yeah, and I think that Atlassian has always traded at a premium because of the strength of their business and the future of this business too. They make, as you've pointed out, this really cool and contemporary software that's all about team engagement, including alignment around values, mission statement, and recognition of behavior and progress through things like gamification, right? So it is, you think about the application of that into a younger audience, and it's hand in glove fit. So you referenced Jira, but before the pandemic, Atlassian introduced a software program called Jira Junior, which is a project management and issue tracking system for kids. The program was built for kids who really wanted to become junior coders. So it's got these features in it like a chore board. So kids can actually keep track of the work that they're doing in the family. So, the other work that they've done is associated with, again, the development of youth. They're building this because they believe that this is the future of education and work, and they're building a big, strong brand there with younger people. They run these youth incubators for teenage social entrepreneurs as well, where Atlassian staff have shared their expertise with teenagers as they develop tech-based social enterprises. So this is really, really important work. So we'd love to see organizations that are doing this. And, they are big-time collaborators as well. They created the Atlassian Foundation, which is a focus on preparing 10 million disadvantaged youth for the workforce of the future by partnering with organizations like MIT's Solve program, who we've done a bunch of work with at Newday, and even the Australian government's Department of Foreign Affairs. So they're based in Australia. So much of the work that they're doing is based down on the Australian continent.
It also strikes me that Atlassian and tools like it are the basis for a new post full-time career way of working, a hybrid form of work that may blend projects across different companies for people who we would have thought of as employees 20 years ago, but who are going to think of as gig workers going forward, even at senior levels. Is Does Atlassian, in your opinion, represent sort of the spear point of a new organizational model that's growing from the grassroots and from youth up into these organizations?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's well said. The organizational structure going forward has changed and will continue to change. I think one of the things that we continue to reflect on is how do you, in a more remote work environment, develop this sense of culture that is more challenging to tackle in a remote world. So, and I think that Atlassian, through some of these more innovative tools that they're delivering through the platform around teamwork, around incentivization, around mission-based learning, is really, really critical to accomplishing those cultural aspects of it as well.
Well, it's clear that the Gen Z, for instance, is simply not going to take a job that doesn't contribute in some way to the betterment of the world around them, or at least the vast majority of those youth are already focused on making the world a better place rather than simply profit. And so in order to be competitive, you're going to need both remedial and lifelong learning, remedial in various areas of skill that you need to bring people up to in order to participate, and then lifelong learning to keep them evolving. So let's turn to education and ed tech companies, and particularly Chegg. This is a company that, because of the recent sell-off, is back to its pre-pandemic share price. Once again, there's an awful lot of that in the market these days. Tell us about Chegg and why it's positioned to enable equitable access to learning.
Yes. So maybe just as an intro to the ed tech space, and to share a personal perspective. So it was about 5 years ago, we started to think through the creation of what was a quality education portfolio. And it was really tough to find organizations that fit the bill. And of course, quality education means so many different things. But this space has changed so significantly over the last 5 years. There are enormous opportunities for ed tech companies going forward. And I think also for traditional educational institutions as they transition at least a component of the work that they do to an online environment. And we do feel that there is room for both. I think what's important is to provide access that is easy, simple, and affordable. Educators need to deliver educational solutions and tools that are super easy to understand, simple to operate, and that work, right? And so I think this has been a challenge for a lot of organizations historically around the building of these big platforms that don't always function as well as they should. So, these are companies like Coursera that went public in 2020 that are developing educational programs that are delivered through other educational institutions for remote learning. Another great example is Minerva, which is a company that is based right here in the San Francisco Bay Area that's delivering its educational classes through other universities all around the world and through its accredited university, which is called Minerva at KGI. We joke about this because I've had an opportunity to talk to a lot of people in the business world, and we all say that if we have an opportunity to go back to school, we're going to go back to Minerva. So these are kids that get to spend every 6 months at a different city around the world. They're pulling STEM students from all around the world that are working on change the world projects. So really, really, really interesting institution.
So one of the things that and Chegg is an example of this, it makes a learning platform for high schools and colleges. But just as in corporate work, you can sort of impose these systems, but you have to integrate the teachers who are local. And my background on this is that I'm married to a teacher who teaches in a Title I high school. So the toughest environment to teach in because people are under-resourced. Does a system like Chegg's seek to replace teachers or augment them? And how does their decision with regard to that impact their potential growth?
Yes. So without question, augment them. And the work that Chegg is doing right now is so critically important. And this is an organization that basically started as a textbook company and has evolved to this new world around education. So they are such an important and powerful resource to students and educators. So as an example, students can browse for scholarships on the Chegg platform, how to obtain them, how universities think about allocation of these scholarships. But what they're doing is providing these really important resources that allows students to access not just scholarships, but information regarding higher ed that leads to higher levels of success. As we had said, the company has come a very long way since being sort of a standalone provider of textbooks. They are doing so much more today, and their mission is essentially this: to skill learners in a really, really different way. So I think as the global population of students grows, they will be taking on more and more of these challenges globally to satisfy what is going to be an exploding need for information all around the world. So very, very important work.
So thinking about the way that these companies are engaging with students throughout their life, is it potentially interesting to look to partnerships with the companies that will eventually hire these kids to help actually support the broadening of access to information, education?
Yes. We've seen this, increase in significant ways over the last decade or so. And I think that organizations like Chegg are getting engaged with students, as you had said, earlier on in their educational careers. I mean, even for us at Newday, I think we've chatted about this before, but we have a partnership with the SIFMA Foundation that runs the national stock market games through the K through 12 educational system. More than 25 million students around the US have participated in that game, which is mostly about financial literacy and the capital markets. But what we did end up introducing into the game a couple of years ago was the sustainability component. So students are now evaluated based upon the sustainability characteristics of the decisions that they make and the companies they invest in addition to the financial characteristics of this organization. But what we began doing this last year was introducing this concept of sustainability in a different way to a much younger audience. So we've had individuals like Jane Goodall and Georgie Bedell and Philippe Cousteau introduce their work to literally thousands of classrooms and thousands of students around the country that was never able to be done before. And you can do it by using platforms like Zoom, and you can use it, by engaging with students in really, really collaborative ways to personalize that learning experience through offerings like Chegg.
So let's talk about the other two companies in the edtech space. Stride, which is built around the idea of personalized learning. So essentially, again, augmenting the teacher, but helping bring more information and variety of topics to the students so that they're engaging what drives their interests. It's trading in the same range as it was back in 2013, but at only 20 times trailing earnings. So it looks like a pretty reasonably priced stock these days. Why is it a good investment, and what is the company doing to support equitable access to education?
Yeah, so I think the majority of the companies that we're talking about today are, given the compression of values in the market right now, are opportunities for entry at levels that we've not seen in some time. So Stride is one of them. They're doing really interesting work, and they're committed to providing this very different educational experience that is accessible to all students, teachers, learning coaches, and others, but most importantly, others regardless of their disabilities, right? So, and this is one of the really cool things that is a part of not just the educational platform that's been constructed today, but the work platform as well. When we talk about people like the disabled community that haven't had those same level of opportunities for employment and education because of, their obvious restrictions. So, Stride in particular is doing a lot of really, really good work associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. So they have provided $20 million in scholarships over the last number of years, including $10 million for students of color to attend college. They are running what are defined as these Stride-powered career boot camps for students as well. They're developing modules in the K through 12 educational system for racial inequity. They are building diversity in their own organization too, to build this community of belonging. So all of those things are really, really important points. They, I believe, from our perspective, are going to be one of the big leaders in the educational space going forward, as they already have been.
And finally, in this category, 2U, which is a genuinely international company. It operates in the US, Hong Kong, Africa, and the UK, providing personalized and hybrid learning experience. It hasn't been profitable during the pandemic, except one time in the second quarter of 2021. What makes it an interesting youth-focused pick with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
So one thing that I would state about all of these organizations is, certainly given what's happened over the last several years, they've all made big capital investments into the expansion of their platforms. So, one of the challenges associated with profitability right now is that fact. So, and I think that many of these organizations will be at a turning point over the coming years as we continue to emerge from the pandemic, as we continue to evolve into this online learning space. So, 2U is one of those organizations that we are very, very excited about. And one of the things through our research that I'm going to restate here, because I was so impressed with the approach that they're taking here. And this comes directly out of their communication materials, is that 2B eliminates that back row in education, meaning that they are providing all students with the same opportunity to learn in a personalized environment, facilitating engagement with subject matter, and providing a strong foundation for future success, regardless of a person's color or their socioeconomic background and things like that. I thought that was a really, really important statement that we're going to continue to reuse here on a go-forward basis. This is a very exciting company. They have, been certified by an organization by the name of Great Places to Work for a third year in a row. They are partnering with organizations like Nonprofit Pencils, that's the name of the organization, that are bringing quality education to students in developing nations like Ghana, Guatemala, and Laos. They are creating a world where students from all walks of life have access to the front row experience they deserve. And so it's, while they are way, way down from their highs back in 2021, we do think that they are at this stage way undervalued compared to where they'll be trading on a go-forward basis.
So one of the issues for companies, all these companies, that seems the most daunting is the need to localize or translate these different learning experiences into so many different languages and in the context of different cultures. We're not going to talk about automatic translation this time around. We'll cover that next time. But how do you assess a company's ability to enter new cultures, which doesn't even map to things that we've talked about in the past in business? You think of markets, but we're talking about something much deeper here.
Well, you assess that capability based upon how they're building their workforce. And, translation tools will become an important part of that. There is so much that we don't know and so much that we take for granted when we think about the expansion of an educational learning platform, even a work environment in areas of the world that come from a very, very different place. So, this is what's super interesting. And I don't want to end our discussion today on a down note, but I do think that it's important to call out the elephant in the room here. So we wake up every day to headlines that portray a world in crisis, and access to information and education allows this community of younger people. This also ties into something that we may touch on today around mental health, allows this community of younger people to feel some level of hope. So, unlike during my childhood and probably your childhood, when events like this that are occurring were far less frequent, whether they be, all of this stuff that's going on in the Ukraine right now, but these depictions of, the California wildfires, homelessness, poverty, and hunger are painted across our media every day. All of this has an extraordinary impact and really shapes how our children are viewing the world today and tomorrow. And I think that what we've all come to understand, that these circumstances are not just over there anymore.
Right.
Like, we've come to understand that we're not as invulnerable as any other big empire from the past.
Or disconnected from the implications of our actions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we've sat on this decadent pedestal of infallibility for some time. And it's, we speak with a lot of younger people in our business. And there have been times that I feel their pain. And I also feel vulnerable, more vulnerable than I ever have. And this vulnerability for them and for me stems from all of this stuff that we're dealing with today. The unlimited number of existential threats that are coming at us. They know they're coming. We know they're coming. And that causes anxiety.
Yeah.
And a lot of discomfort, at best, and mental illness at worst. So those are the things that, when we think about youth skills development, the creation of this next generation of leadership, that we need to get on top of as well.
So this leads into the last discussion that we were going to focus on today. And that is the mental health space. Because, in fact, a new McKinsey report that came out the day we're talking shows that 25% of Gen Z respondents reported feeling more emotionally distressed, which was twice the level of psychological distress reported by millennials and Gen X respondents, and 3 times the level of distress that baby boomers do. So I was intrigued by not just the idea of Talkspace, a company that provides mental health and remote psychotherapy over the net, but also to novel drug companies that are focused on using psychedelics to relieve depression. So tell us first about Talkspace and why this virtual behavioral healthcare company is, I think, I agree with you, well poised to move forward in this fascinating and challenging new world we're building.
Yeah, so I want to be a little bit careful with Talkspace. I mean, I think this is an interesting recovery story, but I think that it's prudent to watch the company for a bit longer. I mean, I think their mission is valiant in helping people overcome mental illness. But the current business model, given a pivot that they went through, has still yet to be proven out. They sort of exploded onto the stage because Michael Phelps is one of their spokespeople and has talked very overtly about some of his own challenges with mental illness. And this is, of course, as we've been talking about, is an area that is going to be really, really important, that people have a hard time talking about publicly, And as you had previously identified, we understand that mental health crises are not going away. There will be no shortage of people that need assistance, or a shortage of companies that are addressing these really innovative solutions to address the crises. And it's important that we develop alternatives, not just counseling services that can be accessed online, but some of these really innovative biotherapeutic solutions as well. So I'm going to add to what you had previously talked about around the severity of the problem. I mean, there are 1 billion people globally today that are impacted by mental health. 50% of the US population alone is estimated will have a mental health disorder at some point in their life. So there's $16 trillion being spent globally on mental health right now. So certainly not a small problem, and not one that represents opportunities for investment as well. You had referenced some of these organizations that are developing sort of alternative approaches to treatment. Mm-hmm. And we are watching closely two organizations, Atai Life Sciences and Compass Pathways. Both are clinical stage companies specifically addressing mental health, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorders. So, some of that work is involving microdosing of psychedelics, which is, at least in early stage trials, is proving out to be something that's highly effective. So both companies are certainly not without risk, as any biopharmaceutical company would be. But I think that this is going to be continue to be an emerging space in the biopharma area that we're going to be paying close attention to over the coming years.
Well, and of course, it's going to require a combination of care, which a company like Talkspace could provide, and forms of therapeutics like Atai and Compass Pathway would provide. Psychedelics is an interesting area, and one that's controversial for a variety of reasons. We've tended to treat pharmaceuticals as sledgehammers rather than scalpels. Do you see the approach in psychedelics that we're seeing around microdosing, around a maintenance approach to mental well-being, rather than a identify, cure, and move on approach that has dominated the way we think about illness in the past?
Yeah,
is this world just so stressful that that's the case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is such a complicated issue that has ties into so many other community health issues, whether it's homelessness and addiction and things like that. I think one of the interesting things about the use of microdosing and psychedelics is that, at least based upon early stage evidence, there aren't the same ramifications associated with addiction and things like that. So, sure. But it is something that, clearly needs to be addressed. I mean, we here in the Bay Area talk about the challenges of homelessness and the severity of mental health issues associated with the homeless population. Something has to be done, and we as a community aren't doing nearly enough to support what is an incredibly tragic situation, not just here in the Bay Area, but all over the country today. And the problem isn't getting any better. So something needs to be done. We need to develop alternative paths. Counseling is a part of it, but there needs to be new technologies associated with, correcting sort of the fundamental problems in our community that have led to this. So,
well, and I know that Newday is doing a lot to invest to address those community issues. Tell us what you're doing with Generation Unlimited.
This partnership is perhaps our most important, certainly our most important, associated with youth skills development. So Generation Unlimited is a public-private partnership that is a component of UNICEF and the United Nations. And when we talk about this 1.8 billion number of younger men and women around the world, that is the community of people that they are specifically addressing in terms of delivery of information around the jobs of tomorrow to better prepare this generation of people for those jobs of tomorrow. So they have a number of really important subcomponents as a part of the platform. So, as an example, they run a program called Green Yoma, which is designed to get younger people out there contributing to the improvement of their communities. And they recently ran a program in Africa whereby they were encouraging young people to go out and clean up their communities, like the waste and plastics around their community. There was a young woman, I'm trying to remember the country that she was from, that actually won the competition because she was taking recycled plastics and then manufacturing shoes for the community members out of those recycled plastics. So they're doing things in really interesting ways because they're providing some level of tokenization and gamification to recognize the students that are part of this program.
I think that's going to be critical too, this notion of gamifying a lot of the things that we normally do in non-commercial activities so that we're incenting people toward social outcomes that are beneficial.
Right. I think that, just coming back to this, their approach around the public and private partnership, we need help. And so Generation Unlimited is a nonprofit NGO organization, but most importantly, they're partnering with major corporations in driving capital into some of those communities. So Accenture and Microsoft are two of them, and a long list of others that are helping them make their work even more effective.
Well, how can our listeners learn more about that and get involved and help you support Generation Unlimited?
So there will be a lot more information coming up relative to our partnership with Generation Unlimited over the course of the next couple of months. And as we discussed earlier in the program, much of the work that we're doing around the Sustainable Development Goal portfolio is tied to youth skills development. So there are some important things to note here, just as we leave the audience today with some reflections on what all of this means. So, and I wanted to reemphasize some of this. So, of today's 1.8 billion youth, 200 million secondary school age young people are not in school today, and 267 million that fall between the ages of 15 and 24 are not in employment, education, or training today. So that's something that we clearly have to address. Meanwhile, over 3/4 of the 429 people or youth that are employed have jobs in the informal sector. So it's another thing that we have to address. And if current trends continue in low-income countries, only 8% of young people will achieve a minimum level of secondary skills compared to, sadly, 70% in high-income countries. So, this challenge of wealth and income equality continues to play back into many of the things that we've talked about regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And these are challenges that are more acute for youth in disadvantaged communities, as we've discussed, and those who lack opportunities because of their gender, race, sexual orientation, disability, or ethnic background, are at an extreme disadvantage today.
And we need to move past seeing the acquisition of wealth as the sole end, because it's clear that when you spread the wealth around, not to take a 60s term and beat it to death, but all boats rise on a rising tide.
That's right.
And we've lost sight of that. But Doug, again, it is always fascinating to have you on the show, and I look forward to the next conversation. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Mitch, thank you for addressing once again what is an incredibly important topic, and look forward to our next level of discussion around this as well.
We've been talking with Doug Heske. He's the CEO of Newday Impact Investing, which you can find at newdayimpact.com. Newday Impact is all one word, no dashes or spaces. In particular, do take some time to check out the Sustainable Development Equity portfolio that the team manages over there. It is a simple way to have them take care of your money and do good with it. Folks, there is nothing simple about what we're moving into, but that is the very nature of being human and being any species on this planet. We have to continue to evolve. We just happen to have evolved our environment in addition to ourselves, whereas other animals generally evolve with their environment. We sometimes go faster than our environment can take. And we can, if we are aware of these things, make really good decisions. And it's time we start to do so. So take some time to learn more about how youth, those 1.8 million kids around the planet, are going to be able to access and use an education to solve the problems in their lives, which will in turn solve the problems in ours. This is Earth 911 Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're going to be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, please take a few minutes to share this podcast and the others that we have produced over the years, as well as any other information that you find that is useful and informative about sustainability with your friends, family, the neighbors. Stop people on the street and start having this dialogue. And we're going to be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.